All right, Oksana, we've got participants walking in the door. Can you hear them? They're kind of noisy.
They're clapping. Too much noise.
They're clapping? Is that what they're doing?
They're excited.
They're excited. All right, so we got a few people coming in. Excited today to have a conversation with Oksana. She's going to share some incredible information about mental health. I have this kind of fear, and she's going to back it up with data. We've talked about this prior to this call, that the next big medical kind of thing that we're going to go through as a world is, mental health is going to be a challenge. It already is. You hear little snippets on the news, and maybe even closer than that to you, but you keep hearing depression is on the rise, and then even to a level of suicide and things like that. I had an instance a couple of weeks ago where I had a conversation with somebody who was very close to that kind of state, and had to get them some outside help, get them to go get themselves some outside help. So it's kind of scary to go through that. It's not the first time I've had that conversation, but it's the first time I've had that conversation in a very long time. So I'm happy that you're here with us today. I'll give you a bit of an intro. As people are coming in as well, open up Q&A. So question and answers, if you click that on the bottom of the Zoom link, you can pop questions in there, and we may hold them until the end. We'll kind of see how the flow goes. It's a bit loose, and you're welcome to use the chat as well. At the end of today's presentation, Oksana is going to allow you to connect with her if you have additional questions or just want to have a one-on-one conversation, 15, 20 minutes on the phone, if that's something that you would like to do as well. So Oksana, mental health advocate, mindfulness trainer, international speaker. Just say a couple of words and they'll understand why it's international.
I'm Russian originally, but I also spoke outside.
Spoke outside, like outside the house?
In the coronavirus, not yet, but internationally. I taught in Russia and India and in Asia.
Very good. So international speaker, as well as best-selling author. So she'll be sure you weave in your book in here as well, and we'll get the link up there. So it's a really good story. She's the founder of SattvaMe, a global training organization focused on mental health, emotional stability, and social well-being for employees, business leaders, and entrepreneurs. And I've had Oksana as my personal mindfulness coach for almost 2 years, maybe a little longer than 2 years.
Longer now.
And then we've spoken at MIT a couple times together. Our paths have crossed in a lot of different speaking engagements. We've done some things for private corporations together. So super excited to have you here with us today. Everybody remember, make sure you're putting in questions in the Q&A and anything that you'd like to in the chat. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Oksana, to take us through this journey of discovery around mental health.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Andy and Petra team, for organizing this. It's an extremely important subject in today's time, and certainly there's a lot of stigma around it, and I personally had it too. So I wanted to bring not only the research, but my personal experience to this conversation and unpack it into the framework of the work environment and the employees. I kind of look into the future of what is coming and how we can get prepared for it. So I'm going to share my slides very quickly, and then we'll get started. So I want to start, and you kind of spoiled my opener, but originally I am Russian, and I found this picture. This is me about 12, 13 years old, and I'm here in the center with a black shirt, and I wish I had this mask. Where was this time? So we've been preparing in Russia, or at least I've been preparing for over 20 years for this time, and now I'm the only one who does not have the mask. But being Russian means that when it comes to mental health, I want to give it to you straight, like a shot of vodka today. So bear with me. It's going to be a lot of hard facts, but it's kind of creating that awareness before we get to the solutions. So what are we going to discuss today? Well, why mental health is important as your company's next risk and in the context of coronavirus. what wellness initiatives may and may not work and why, and we'll touch up on that. Then we'll go through ROI on mental health programs. And finally, I will share the practical tools. And I'm going to ask all of you to kind of hold your questions about specific practical tools for any particular illnesses or specific situations almost until the end, or let's talk about it privately, because it's like a doctor's visit. You cannot ask the doctor for prescription before he can explain to you what the disease are. So keep that reference in mind. Anything that I'll be touching up besides that, then please go ahead and share questions and we'll unpack them as we go. Hope that sounds good. And what I want to do is to start with this little test for you, for yourself. Have you regularly experienced any of this? Feeling restless, wound up, or on edge? Being easily fatigued, having difficulty concentrated, mind going blank, being irritable, having muscle tension or pains, difficulty controlling feelings of worry, having sleep problems, especially difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, restlessness, unsatisfied sleep. If you have experienced any or all of these symptoms, well, this is generalized anxiety disorder symptoms. So the point here is that the mental health disease are not as an outside issue as we tend to believe. Let's do just another round very quickly. Numbness, disbelief, anxiety. And here for me, what's most important is anger, short and long-term temper, and then increased use of alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. Physical reactions, headache, body pains, stomach problems, skin rashes, again, difficulty concentrated, problems with sleeping, and then changes in your appetite, energy levels, and activity. And how are you dealing with that? So if there are any of these symptoms that you're experiencing, then these are the common signs of distress, which are not uncommon in the times of pandemic or other stressful situations. But some of you may have been experiencing it even before all of these things has started to happen. So what is mental illness, or how does it's actually the majority of stats come from CDC and other mental health associations here in the United States. So the way they define mental illnesses are conditions that affect our ability to think, feel emotions, and our actions. Or it impacts our behavior or how we act. And what is important to highlight here that it could be occasional and it could be long lasting, but it definitely impacts ability to function and relate to one another. And what I wanted to bring home here that we have normalized before coronavirus, we have normalized a lot of stressors. And my point is not that it's not okay to feel anxiety, worry, and fear and stress all the time. It's not okay to overdose yourself on coffee and alcohol and then take sleeping pills and digestive pills in order to help yourself regulate. And it's definitely not okay to have that loud critic voice inside your head all the time. And these are already the symptoms of what can lead to a serious mental health illness or significantly impact your productivity, focus, and ability to integrate in the community. Hope so far so good. If there are any questions about anything that I say, Andy, I know you'll interrupt me. So until then, I'll get carried away. So
real quick, so just so everybody's know, I get asked this question. I forgot to clarify it earlier. We are recording this. It'll be put into a blog with all the materials and posted on the website at the very end. And I do have a kind of a clarifying question from your lists. So as you read down through there, you get to like easily irritated. And I go, yes, of course, that's me. And then you get to a couple of those others. I'm like, no, that's not. How many of those lists, like, do you need all of that to fall into those categories, or do you just need one off that list?
There are symptoms. So it's literally, if you're easily irritable, but you're having that all the time with all people, then it's a sign that there's something wrong going on. But if it's just once in a while, we all can have, some challenges. So it really, the answer is it all depends. But no, you don't have to have all the things on the list. It's just, these are the common symptoms. You can have 3 or 4 out of them. You can have one, but very severe. The common one is sleeping problems, but then the sleep problems will cause a lot of the other ones. So it's kind of all interconnected, and we look at it as an integrative approach here.
All right, cool. Keep going. Thank you.
Alrighty, so I wanted to bring up these people, and you probably know all of them except for one. And the reason why I'm bringing them up is because we admire and we tend to think about these people as impactable and super powerful, and they've changed our lives in so many ways. But all of these, plus many more, have experienced mental health disease and illnesses. For example, Martin Luther King was suicidal, and he attempted suicides a few times. Lincoln is known for his extreme depressions. Churchill also had anger management problems and depressions. Diana was bulimic. Princess Diana was bulimic, and she had depressions. And this guy that you might not know actually is Lawton Chiles, and he is a Florida senator, granted I'm in Florida right now, in 1971 to 89, and then the governor in 1991, 98. What's interesting about him is that he was elected after a public scandal that he was taking Prozac for his depression. So he still was elected even though the people, so I thought that would be cool. So in fact, let's look at some stats of how often people experience the symptoms of mental health illnesses. It is statistics before the coronavirus, so now it's actually much higher, but 1 in 5 US adults, this is 2018, experience mental health illnesses. 50% of us will get it at some point of life just because of the way life's structured. Suicide is number 2 leading cause in deaths in the United States among the ages group 15 to 34, and it's number 10 leading cause among the other ages groups. And what is serious is that 90% of people that experienced mental health, 90% of suicides have experienced mental health illnesses before they took their life. What are the suicide rate statistics? This is 2017, it's going up. But we have been experiencing for the past 20 years, since the year 2000, rising suicide statistics, and it's just been going up and up and up. And it's as high as it's ever been since Great Depression and World War. And again, these are all pre-coronavirus because obviously we cannot really say, but then suicides also don't include what's called the death of despair. And the death of despair includes suicides, but then drug overdose, which is opioids, which is a huge problem, at least in the United States and I think worldwide, and then alcoholic liver disease. So people that are dying from abusing alcohol. And when it's talking about the suicide or depression in general, what troubled me the most is that only 29% of people with depression reported themselves contacting mental health professional. And that's where I find it very dear to my heart because I've experienced severe anxiety and depression the majority of my life up until I found tools that I now teach and bring to the workplaces and privately. And I've experienced these symptoms, and I literally did not contact any doctors or any professionals because it was hurting my dignity. And I felt like if I need to admit it, there's nothing wrong with me because I'm happy sometimes and I do things sometimes, but that lack of admitting it to yourself, that's what drives people. So, and it presents a challenge in the workplace. Even if you provide those lines, I hear a lot of employers right now say, oh, we provide psychiatrists fast lines and things like that, expecting that people will call. But Andy, you're lucky that that contact of yours or client has reached out to you and you were able to get him help. Most people don't. So this is something for you to consider. Now I want to do, this is just summary of the stats that we just covered. I want to do a little poll. When do you think out of all seasons, spring, summer, fall, and winter, the most suicides occur? And just click on one. Out of the 4 seasons, when do you feel that the most suicide will occur?
Are you able to see that poll, Oksana?
I know, I need to click on it to get out.
I did my job. I launched it at the appropriate time, so I did my job there. That was cool.
Okay, yeah, no, you did awesome. Actually, I cannot click on it, but I actually had my answer, which I don't want to skew for you, but I'll wait.
80% of the people have voted. We'll take a second and get the rest in. So right now, overwhelmingly, The vote is 84% say winter, 8% say spring, 4% say summer, and 5% say fall. So, overwhelmingly, the answer is winter.
Winter. That's what I thought too. When I started to research all of that, I'm like, winter, of course. Well, the correct answer is actually spring. And let me explain to you why. In the winter, we're mobilizing for survival. And we don't have actually enough energy to execute on suicide because we're all wrapped up around survival. The same thing applies to the war veterans. They're a very small percentage of soldiers that commit suicide during the war times, while they're at service, while they're active, while they're in the battle. There's comradeship there. There is, perseverance and activation. A lot of it happens after the impact. So people are coming back home from the war, and that's when they start to see like there's something wrong with them. Right now, why is it important? Why I'm bringing this up is because when it comes to COVID-19, I look at it as we are in the winter right now. A lot of businesses are mobilizing. A lot of businesses have collapsed and changed. Some companies will actually feel the impact in that winter in the summer months. So that is going to be another wave. But the wave of the mental health issues that we're all going to be facing, it's coming right after that. It's that spring. Why? Because ideally, the thing's supposed to be going back to normal. But in the winter, everything is gloomy. So when spring comes, people start feeling the difference. Like, well, I still don't feel good inside, but everybody's supposed to be happy. So that is a kind of something for you to consider. And how can I click out of it? And in Russia, we have the proverb, which I kind of reminded myself, prepare sleds in the summer and carriage in the winter. So if you want to prepare for this next pandemic that is coming, then now is a good time to prepare. So prepare that carriage, and as the whole purpose for you to remind you about the fact that I'm Russian. So let's consider kind of what are this mental health, what mental health well-being looks like, right? We covered a lot of the illness and a lot of the gloomy stuff. Let's go to the spring side or the summer. Sorry guys, I'm trying to click through. So mental health includes 3 areas of well-being according to CDC definition, which is emotional, psychological, and social. I personally like to include 3 more, which is physical, financial, and spiritual, just because it feels life is incomplete if I am not well in all of the 6 areas of life. And what is important here is just when mental well-being allows you to handle stress, relate to others, and make healthy choices. So when we are well overall, we just function better and we perform better as employees, as units of society, as human beings. And I have personally struggled with this for the majority of my life. And I think that's what prevented me from looking for help. My rationale was, since I am experiencing moments of joy, and I had plenty of those throughout my lifetime, then it means when I am in really dark places and I felt that extreme level of anxiety and depression and suicidal thoughts, then I felt like, well, nothing is wrong with me because I have the moments of joy. Well, mental health disease do not exclude the fact that you can have moments of well-being. And if you have moments of poor mental health, it does not mean that you are having a disease and illness. So you can be sad, you can be anxious, you can be stressed. It just cannot be chronic, and that's something that impacts your thinking, behavior, and how you are feeling all the time. So that is important to differentiate, and that's where you need to really do the self-assessment and say, how much is not good? And the question that, it was actually interesting, it was one from the kind of planning that you did, Andy, that people were saying that kind of like, I'm thankful, but I know I should be grateful, but, you know, I know that considering all things, I shouldn't be feeling this sad for myself, but. So my question is, why is it not your experience all the time that gratitude and well-being and joy, in fact, I think that the majority of people have not experienced well-being even before the coronavirus hit. Everybody was kind of in a hamster wheel and going and achieving and doing all these things, being really stressed. And the kind of like the way I want to pursue or explain it to you is that the experience of well-being is always an internal experience. However, especially in the Western culture, we are trained that it needs to be an external conditions and experiences. For example, you know, get a good job, get a good education, the family needs to be in order, and there is always external motivators that makes us feel better. Coffee, alcohol, sleeping pills, these are also external tools that we use to feel better, but we really don't look of what is going on inside all the time. In fact, I have a question for you, Andy, and the rest of the audience. I don't see you, but where do you see me? Like point, where do you see me? Andy, you can point.
Right there?
You're pointing, I'm sure that most of you are pointing in the screen. Like, I see you right there. Where do you hear me? Right there, right? Like you're talking on the microphone, like it's coming out of computer. Well, actually you're seeing and hearing me right here. Consider that. You're only seeing an image of the computer and it projects on the retina of your eye, and your eye picture projects in the brain. How your brain is operating and what lens of the mindset you are having is that's how you're going to be seeing you. Some of you might be annoyed by my Russian accent right now, and some of you might be loving it. So I am the same, but you have different perceptions of me. So the question to you, if you had a choice, if you really had self-mastery, if you really had perfect self-regulation, would you choose to be joyful and happy and not stressed, or would you be choosing by definition to be worried, anxious, and depressed, and super stressed? Which would be your choice naturally if I told you that you have perfect choice and you have all the tools to do that? Andy, which one would you choose?
Why do you ask me this question?
Because I cannot ask everybody else. I can see you. Anyway, I don't want to poll, but I would assume that the majority of people in their sane and correct minds would say, I would choose to be happy. I would choose to be well. I would choose to be productive and focused and creative, right? So why is it not your experience then? Is because we have the most evolutionary computer on the planet Earth, which is our brain, but none of us have read user's manual. We don't know how to operate it. And we have such extreme levels of intelligence of this machine that it hijacks us. And that level of intelligence, when it doesn't have a stable platform, when it doesn't have mental stability, it overwhelms us and it confuses us. And we get all drawn to this external experiences instead of trying to correct and understand us internally. And therefore, all the human experiences must be addressed first internally. And that training, that platform, that stability that I'm talking about, it makes all the differences. These are the tools that I've been teaching, and that's what helped me to climb out of my anxiety, my depression, my suicidal thoughts, is once I got stable practice, once I got that platform going, then I was able to see and make the changes that are necessary. Let me explain it to you the other way, just to make sure that everybody got this. Car race driver. Think about a car race driver or any Olympic player. They train every day, and that car race driver goes and trains himself to go high speeds, how to brace himself within the body when the hit comes, if he crashes, how to navigate the car, how to activate his mental state, how to regulate his stress emotions so the stress doesn't go too high and he doesn't get hijacked, so he doesn't start doing counterintuitive stuff. He trains all the time, right? So now, if that car race driver who trains go to whatever high interstate you have in your country or your state, and he gets into a car accident, how much do you think he will be mentally impacted versus a regular person just getting into a car accident that the car goes 360 degrees 3 times? I would say significant change, because for the car race driver, it would be a habitual thing that he's been training or she's been training for, versus a regular person will have probably a post-traumatic disorder because they have not trained and prepared that mental health system. That is exactly why, while Andy and his team were preparing plans how to save the world, the other people were fighting for the toilet paper. That is the kind of the very simplistic explanation why some people lost it and they were in total survival mode and still are, and some people are mobilizing and being productive and they're looking how to help others. So I hope that kind of solves some of the mystery, but the point is here is you need to establish the platform for self-regulation and self-mastery. And let's get into that. What has been employers doing for that so far? Well, what employers have been doing is what's called wellness initiatives. And some of them are biometric screening, weight loss education, exercise step trackers, smoking programs, financial education, nutrition. And I want to make sure that everything is included. Some of them are offering yoga and guided meditation, which is kind of like the meditation mindfulness was my domain. And what is important here is that, again, everything here is external. They're offering these tools for people to do something externally, but there is very little impact internally. Why do I say though? Is because it's a difference between education and training. Education, usually inspirational. Here are your resources, and you can go and you can find that resource. It may or may not result in immediate action. Some people just get that email and they never open it up. Does not result in repeated behavior, especially when offered after work or during work, depending on the company. Fast forgotten, if it's not continuously repeated. It's entertaining and easy. That's why those lunch and learns are pretty cool, but not always effective. Socializing, people mingle and interact. It has external motivation. Usually companies say some kind of carrot, we'll pay you for this, or we'll give you this gift card, or we'll do something. And as a result, it's not effective and it comes as an expense to the company. Versus the training, where I'm interested in that domain, and that's all the programs that we structure is for the training. Training is practical. It is day-to-day grind of what you're supposed to do. It demands an immediate action. So people already put work to do versus just say, oh, it's out there. We say, do this to be able to do it. It trains the repeated behavior, habits, routines, or whatever we want to change. What is that organizational change that we want to bring, or personal behavior? It becomes eventually part of the culture, and as part of the personal culture and both the company culture. It is engaging, and most importantly, it's challenging. Changing habits or changing anything requires the effort, and it's a challenge. And it's, as a result, because it's challenging, it becomes the bonding experience. Is that camaraderie in Soviet Union terms. And then it requires internal motivation. People must know why they're doing it. Not just because the company said it's going to be good for you and get in that carrot, but because they want to do it. There's need to be an internal buy-in. As a result, when the training done right, it becomes an investment for the company, and there is ROI on that. So I wanted to make sure that there is differentiation for that. And but the biggest kind of difference, and you know, you're not supposed to remember all of that, training leads to behavioral change. And that's what I want you to remember, that training will always lead to behavioral change, whereas education will leave things as they are and always been, or people will return to it. And what is the impact here is on the most valuable resource, which are your people, which get engraved and passed on through the company culture. So the result of mental health, for me at least, the goal here is to impact the culture long term through the immediate behavioral change of the people. So just wanted to pause for a second. Is there any questions, or I'm going very fast? I'm going my Russian way very fast.
You're race car driving. Keep going.
Good, Ryan. So far so good? Mm-hmm. All right. Awesome. So
I like the definition, the education, training, no change, behavioral change. That's a good delineation between the two.
Yeah, I kind of like to keep it short and concise. I mean, I give too many bullet points. So I don't like bullet points. Anyway, let's look at the ROI on mental health at work. And I want to spice it up a little bit. And I found out this term. In fact, in Japan, they had a term called Karoshi, which means death by overwork. And these are Japanese symbols, because in Japan, they had this issue of suicide from burnout for many years, especially among the male population. And they started to look as a society, what's going on. And so there is a whole term of burnout, of suicide from burnout at work, and it's called Karoshi. So I thought just a little fun fact. But let's go back to the numbers and statistics. So the depression and anxiety cost global economy, that's before the coronavirus, $1 trillion per year. About between the 125 and 190 billion, this is workplace expenditure in the United States alone. And what is interesting for me here that what causes it, what's called high demand at work, that's our burnout. Meaning that people are putting a lot of pressure. Well, guess what your best players are experiencing right now? They have a lot of pressure. Guess what all the leaders are experiencing right now? They have a lot of pressure. And then what people are, the people that are not employed, then it goes to the lack of insurance. Work-family conflict, right now, the domestic abuse and domestic violence is on the rise. The divorce rates in Asia and China went up threefold after their quarantine. So this is something for us to consider what's going on and what we are here to encounter next. Depression cost employers in the United States, 17 to 44 billion between. These are all calculations, mathematical estimations. I didn't come up with it. Professors in Stanford and at Harvard did. And it cost about 200 million lost work days each year in productivity. That's depression alone. We're not talking about other spectrum of things. What is it kind of, how to bring it home for you? Because these are very big numbers, very hard to relate for the company. Think about your cost. If you have employees that have payroll of $45,000 per year, if they get impacted by mental health illness, your cost will be about 34%. So if you have $45,000 employee, then your cost can be 15 grand per year. $60,000 employee, 20 grand per year. 85,000 is about 30 grand per year, and then 120,000 is about 40 grand per year. These are your costs. These are within the company. That's why I really want everyone to pay attention. What does the government do to help us out with a mental health issue? Well, pretty much these are the numbers. The $2 per person gets spent in the developing countries for mental health issues. We're lucky, we get $50 per person. Guess how much impact that does on anybody's health in general and understanding of the grandiosity of this issue. And therefore, just like majority of things, I believe that it needs to go to businesses, and we need to take responsibility, first of all, personal responsibility, but then as company owners, we need to invest into these things and help our people and not being afraid of the subject and the topic and pretend like, yeah, it's somewhere out there and it's not me and I can toughen it up through stress. I certainly did that at least 27 of my life, kind of suck it up and keep going. And guess what? Did many stupid things and almost killed myself. So don't recommend that.
Oksana,
go ahead.
You could go back. There's a question about what makes up the costs on payroll. So you've got, 34%. Is that lost productivity? Is it the mismanagement of work or doing things incorrectly?
Yeah, there are many things. So yes, it is lost productivity. It's healthcare costs, meaning if that person goes to the doctors and they need surgeries and whatever, your kind of healthcare cost goes in there. Sick leave. What else was in there? It's kind of like lost productivity, but that they're absenteeism for sure, that they might be at work physically, but they're not really present and they're not doing their best or their best capacity, and then burnout costs. So there are both the technical kind of like healthcare costs if they go and pay the doctor kind of thing, and if they need medical care, but there are also this latent cost that it's kind of harder to calculate. So there's a lot of bulk in there. I hope that answers, but it's an estimation and overall things that they were looking. I think it's very hard to get the solid numbers in any of this. So how do we move from here? Let's look at the bright side. I wanted to remind to you that it's not okay to experience worry, fear, and anxiety all the time or regularly. It's not okay to have loud voice inner critic and beat yourself up for things that you have not accomplished today because there's so much, like 700 emails in your email box. And it's not okay to use boosters like caffeine, alcohol, sleeping pills, digestive pills. These are all signs that you need to change something in your life, and that is already under the domain of mental health. For me, the experience is that if you can't change what you're not aware of and willing to accept. So the first step of the awareness, which is mindfulness that I teach, like how do you arrive there? And then acceptance that it's okay. Now, how are we going to move on from there? And that's where the programs come in that I want to talk to you about. But first, a little more of this ROI and employee wellness programs thing. I found contradicting statistics. Some people say that wellness program, I mean, some polls in the company say wellness programs don't work, and some say this is what's going to save the world. And therefore, these are from Harvard, Rand study, and some other studies, and I can list the resources later. But Harvard kind of found out that it's 6-to-1 ratio, meaning that if you spend $1 on wellness program, you will get $6 in return. And that calculating the medical costs of $3.30 and then absentees, the $2.73. So this is the kind of answering your question, Andy, or whoever asked the question, that there is medical cost and there is absenteeism cost, or productivity cost, lack of focus cost, things like that. Then in another study, they have discovered that you can actually save 86% of hardcore medical cost of the company, like that whole healthcare cost that company has. However, the disclosure there, it's for disease prevention programs, meaning these are for the people that already have some kind of disease like diabetes or heart disease or anything else that are working in your population. And if you educate them that they need to go and get regular screen checks, that they need to go out and get the pills, then you will be able to save that amount percentage. The lifestyle programs, which the majority of wellness programs are, they're just lifestyle programs, you know, steps and yoga classes and go do that. They actually have 13% reduction in healthcare costs. But the participation varies. So participation is 87% of the lifestyle programs, but it's only 13% reduction. And I find it reasonable if the programs are not the trainings, if they're education. If they're education, then yeah, that's pretty much, you're gonna hit some people that already have that intrinsic motivation, but it's not across the broader spectrum of your employees or your team or whoever. And then something that is very hard to measure, and this is the question to you: how much do you value? How much do you put value on your retention? How much do you put value on your engagement? How much do you put value on caring deeply for your employees, their well-being as people, their relationships between one another, and productivity? So all experts kind of agree, or scientists, that it's very, very hard to put a dollar sign on these. And so this is a personal question for you to answer. And before I kind of go a little bit deep into the program, what is important for at least the programs that I teach, I cannot speak for all of them, but there's very smart people that are looking to the futuristics of how does the whole employment spectrum, what are we gonna do in 2030? And they all agree that in 2030, only 1 in 10 skills will be technical skills. The rest of them are gonna be soft skills. And for me, the programs that we create, mental health, is the training for the soft skills. And some of them are communication skills, flexibility, adaptability, creativity, conflict resolution, leadership, problem solving, teamwork, and integrity. So remember that aspect of self-mastery and self-management and self-regulation. How do you adapt when coronavirus hits? How long does it take you to adapt? How flexible you are with ever-changing environments. We were working in the office, now we need to work online. All these things kind of go into that domain of the soft skills, which again, leadership, you know, who took charge and who collapsed? Who started to be all melodramatic and who just said, you know what, let's brace, that's what it is, let's go. So something for you to consider, because I think the soft skills term getting a little traction, but just like mental health term is not very sexy, it's not very popular. So what I want to give you an example of kind of the combination of the things that we put together when we work. I kind of put it for the simplicity, a 4-week program. And right now, because of the coronavirus, it's literally, you can only look like 3 months in advance of any programs. Nobody's going to commit for 12 months. So because the program will need to change. Once we're going to go back to the offices, the program will need to change. So you should not be doing longer than 3 months programs right now. But it's usually the kickoff of what are you trying to convey and recruit the employees. What we've been doing with Andy too and Petra team is those 15-minute practices live via Zoom, very impactful. I've been doing tons of webinars and educating, just like what I'm doing right now, educating, having people opportunity to ask questions. Micro-learning tools and practices, they need to be super short. Mine are as short as 2 minutes. but they're frequent and regular. And then opportunity to have this group learning and reflections. And then of course you need to evaluate what is the impact, are the employees liking, getting their feedback, because it's for them and not something that you just install like a wellness program. The attendance there is usually around 10%, sometimes even less. And it's a small group of people and they don't know one another and they don't talk afterwards. So what's the point of putting all this education and spend money on that? Then you can actually console this money and put together something that's going to create the behavioral change that you want to. Of course, a lot of you can go ahead and create your own programs, but there's something that I've learned in my experience is that you can get an expert and complete the journey much faster. I found this quote from the Rumi, who's one of my favorite Sufi poets, highly recommend to read. Whoever travels without the guide needs 200 years for a 2-day journey. That's how I felt with the tools of me learning the tools in 2012. And for about 5 years, I didn't have a guide. I didn't have a teacher that would explain to me and create this things much faster and easier for me. And therefore, my progression was just slow. I was meditating 3-4 times a week, transcendental meditation, but I still felt suicidal. I still had anger management issues. I still had extreme levels of worry. And it wasn't until I paired the education, the immersions, it wasn't until I found my teacher in India that kind of put all these things into integrative approach that I started to make huge bounds and leaps and progress, to the extent that I can claim to you right now that I don't have experience of anxiety and worry. It used to be my 99% experience, constantly the hardest pumping, feels like the earth is gonna go outside of my feet. I would overschedule, I would overdo, I would constantly rush. I don't have it anymore. So when done right, it is really, really impactful tool. So I wanna pause for a second if there are any questions or any comments or anything that I can answer.
Yeah, I got one for you, and then I'm gonna ask you, this is a really tough one up here actually. How could, so we have groups of people on here that are from organizations, obviously, and we have individuals inside of those organizations on this call.
Right.
If they wanted to start doing something to begin to protect their mental health and guard against the thing that we all are kind of saying is going to be coming, right? I wrote down this quote, those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Winston Churchill. You showed some graphs earlier that showed what happened after the Great Depression, what happened after the World Wars. I mean, we kind of see what's coming. It's this train with coming at us from down the tracks. But we need to do some things. You know, we can't just, we have to take some action.
Right.
Short of somebody, you know, hiring you or hiring somebody else or putting together a 4-week program, do you have something in here that's like simple that people could start doing right away?
Absolutely. It all boils down to routines. If you can create routines, habits and routines, so daily routine, look at what are you doing on daily basis to maintain yourself in the what's called higher elevated states. Exercise is one excellent one. Meditation is another excellent one. As simple as drinking water consistently, because when we drink a lot of coffee and alcohol, we are dehydrated. It dehydrates our brain. We start to get a total different hormonal thing. So we are creatures of habits. Human beings are routine behavior creatures. That's how we've been created. And therefore we thrive on healthy routines and we collapse under unhealthy routines. So start increasing the ratio and put together a regimen. What are you going to do first thing in the morning? What are you going to do last thing at night? And what are these things that contribute for better sleep? For me, for example, I share my whole day in my book, Next Level You, which you can get on Amazon. I share my story there. So if you want to hear kind of like the full spectrum of my journey, super short, easy read. I mean, you wrote it. And there I give tools and explanations. So you can start there. Like, get the book, see what I do. I wake up 5 in the morning and I say, this is what I do. And then this is what I do the last thing. I had huge problems with sleep, couldn't figure out my sleep. There I list 10 tips for sleep. So we're also gonna share in the resources, I think we mentioned, I'm gonna share my online platform where I guide practices. If you feel like this is where you wanna start and have guided practice once a day, do that. We've done 15 minutes with Petra. We have one last one today, and I was amazed how little people were attending. And I believe it's because lack of education. By the way, this webinar, it's education. I am fully aware that the majority of you are not going to go and do anything with it. They're just going to be like, yeah, that's great. And that is fine too, but there's only that much you can do via webinar format. So the tools, let me, I guess, go here, so then it would be more impactful for individuals that want to start right now. Stress management is all about breath management. Our breathing can tell us a lot about stress levels and therefore how you change that. When I teach on a very simple level, exhale to let go, people holding their breath when they're stressed. So if you can remember how to exhale, CDC, which is amazing. CDC recommended now deep breathing as a tool for coping with COVID-19 stressed situations. However, the majority of people do not know how to take a deep breath. Literally, people, like if I tell you right now how to take a deep breath, 99% of you will not be able to do that. This is something that I've recorded and I teach, and I'm expanding on it too. We don't know as a society how to do deep breathing, but if you know, or at least attempt to, take 6 of those. There is a medical study for that. And most importantly, when you are in doubt, when you are anxious, when you are kind of starting to feel like things are speeding up, slow down your breathing and make it deeper and more engaged within your stomach, not within your chest, but within your stomach. You start with low abdominals, and that's kind of like as much as I'll leave there, and then we can see how we can teach more of that later if there's interest. So I wanted to also share with you this mental visualization or kind of emotional processing tool. So breathing impacts your hormones and it impacts the body. This is more of the kind of emotional and mental regulation. When things and emotions start to bubble up, you got bad news, your spouse or your friend lost their job, and you're feeling this whole bubbling up thing, that's when you want to apply this tool. But like anything else, chances are you're not going to be able to apply it right in the moment. Apply it right afterwards. It helps you process and not get traumatized from the experience, but extract the wisdom, feel the empathy, and then move on. So easy to remember, RAIN. First, you recognize that that experience is happening. Then you need to acknowledge that it's happening. How do you acknowledge? Instead of say, I am anxious, you say, I feel anxious. You label your emotion. I feel worried. I feel overwhelmed. I feel depressed. By saying not I am, but I feel, you put degree of separation between you and the problem. And that's how our brain works. It's the prefrontal cortex versus the amygdala, which is the limbic system. Once your limbic system is hijacked, there's probably breathing is your best way to go when you're super anxious. But if you are kind of more or less okay, then you can start bringing it to prefrontal cortex. That's where the decision-making power comes. Once you start labeling it, you start investigating it. Look at your emotion from the third-party degree perspective and start looking at where is it in the body, what shape it is, what form it is, how is it moving, does it have the color? And you literally do it inside your brain. Okay, I have this anxiety in my chest, so it moves like, like a big needle sack, and it's kind of actually stuck and it makes me breathe shallow. So I'm only activating my brain in a different direction. And then nurture. Nurture means apply the words and the gestures that you would if you would see a friend in distress. If you will see a child who is upset, how would you behave with them? What would you say to them? Instead, now you're saying these things to yourself. You're putting your hands on your chest. You're saying it's okay, like everything's gonna be fine. Breathe, everything's good. So you're just applying it towards self, but it's so unnatural in our society that it's kind of like, it was definitely a learning skill for me, how to nurture myself. But that's the whole game changer. That's when you are making changes within yourself versus somebody else is doing it for you. And then I know it's unpopular and you said, don't bring it up. But I do want to say meditation, it's the tool that will create that foundation. Remember I said that our brain hijacks us all the time because we don't have a stability platform. We don't have the foundation of how to read the user manual. Well, this is you reading the user manual. This big intellectual property that is here and you have no idea how to control, most of us don't. while you're meditating, you are seeing the patterns, you're starting understanding the mind, and you start practicing emotions. This is kind of like a really high level. I'm kind of certified meditation initiator, and there's a lot to unpack here. So apps are good de-stress tools. They don't lead to behavioral change, just so kind of like we're clear. In fact, the app drop rate about 2-3 months. So there are more to meditation that I could speak about. And I have actually myths and truths about meditation webinar that I recorded that you can find on the YouTube for SattvaMe channel. So this is kind of it. I wanted to share my personal contact. I want to remind you, if you have a team, after this, I will send a Calendly link so you can book a 20-minute consultation for me. If you don't have a team, please don't book the calls, but rather email me your question if you have one, just because there are a lot of you. So I want to make sure that I address everything and don't get burned out myself, my mental health too. And then the book is a great resource. I've shared my story and what I've been struggling with and how I was overcoming it as it was coming. So I feel that those of them that read it, just by reading from my story, they were able to sort out a lot of their situations and questions. And there I share science in there and tools along the way, so you'll be able to do that. So I think this is it for me.
Right. So hang on, I got some questions for you. We are a small company and have no wellness program. Can you recommend a simple starting point? Is a simple starting point like the online platform that you have to, like, you're going to give everybody 30 days access or something to the online platform and the recap? Is that something they could just start with? Do they need an outline for that? How would that work?
Okay, here's my thoughts on how I can help small companies. I have a number of small companies that I can actually bulk together. So if you're a small company, reach out, because if I have 3 or 4 small companies, we're going to bulk together and we're going to do a program together as that group. We'll cap it at 30 people maybe, depending on how many companies are there, but program is the most effective. I can send you to the platform. In fact, all of you are going to receive the links and you can start there. But without the explanation, without having that touch, without having the structure, it's very hard for people to adapt and get engaged with it consistently. A lot of people will sign up, but then they'll start dropping. So it requires a little more inspiration, motivation, constant ongoing. So don't get discouraged. If you're a small program, small company, still reach out. We'll just bulk us together and we'll do something so it addresses everybody's needs. If you cannot, and that's completely something out of your spectrum right now, then yes, on the online platform, there is like a 5-day mindful start program that you can start there. And then once you get used to my style, if you like that, then you can just do one guided practice a day. And then also on the online platform, there are more webinars and talks about what the education is.
Okay, so the answer would be follow up with you and you'll get them started in the right direction.
Yes, and they can start with online platform too.
Okay, the online platform.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a couple of more questions. I have a team member that is experiencing signs of depression, chronic negative self-talk. We got him a counselor, and I make sure to give him time each day. Are there any other suggestions for this person?
The question from me is, what kind of counseling is there? Because I've been studying trauma and PTSD and like severe trauma and there are big T trauma and small T trauma. And there's so many styles of therapy. And what I've learned, which was to my surprise, that not all therapy helps with different styles of trauma. Just because he's experiencing anxiety, there's a source to that anxiety. There's a reason why he or she is experiencing that. And different therapies can be helpful or can do nothing. So the majority of, like, let's say talk therapy, it's not proven to solve the core issue of a person. So a lot of the wellness or covered medically therapies that are offered by insurance companies, unfortunately, are least effective because we have not been experiencing or experimenting with that. And I would look into different styles of therapies for him or her, but then breathing would be extremely impactful. The style of breathing that I give, Andy, you've experienced my breathing. There are ones that can work you up into frenzy, but there are ones that can really calm you down. And for people with anxiety, that calm down breathing is super, super important.
And then there's a question here. You talked earlier in the presentation around, coffee, alcohol, that stuff. Like, you don't need any of that stuff.
I think 50% dropped out after that, right? They're like, we're not listening to her.
There's a serious question around that. Being on prescription medication for depression. And, I'm not sure that this is I don't feel qualified even to kind of address it, but you can talk from maybe a personal opinion around that with your own experiences, maybe.
Yeah, purely my personal opinion, not a medical advice. I want to give it on the record. Depression medication, or any kind of medication, let's just not talk about depression specifically, any kind of medication supposed to help you to elevate the symptoms so you can deal with the root of the problem, and then you're supposed to get off it in general. So depression medication is supposed to be a short-term boost for you to be able to feel elevated emotions, to feel happy, to feel the energy. So then you use that energy to make changes in your lifestyle, in your life, in your routines, in your behavior, so you don't get depressed in the first place. Unfortunately, the way the medical system works in the Western world, it's all about just feeding people drugs. Well, body gets used to drugs, and then you just need more and more and more and more of it. I personally, because of my stigma to mental health, I never took depression medications or anti-anxiety, and I probably should have, because my journey would have been shorter. But I have friends and people who do, and unless you do other tools to stabilize the platform, then you can never get off it. And for me, well-being is not complete until you can actually get off or reduce the dose. If you're reducing the dose, that's a good direction. It means you're progressing. It means you're putting less chemicals into your body, and then you have higher capacity to naturally overcome the adversities that life brings. So my take on that is kind of simple. Yes, you can take coffee in the morning, but when you turn it into 6, 5, 8 cups a day, that's not well-being. That means you're running on a high. When you have to have a glass of wine at night because otherwise you cannot handle your kids, then it's a big sign that there's some changes that needs to happen. What are you doing during the day that you're getting so wound up at night? So it's the whole lifestyle. That's why I say that programs are important, because it's an integrative approach. It's not just change one thing and you're gonna be fine. There are complex things that need to change to address that.
So we've got a comment. It's actually, it's a little bit of a side. In South Africa, cigarettes and alcohol were banned during a lockdown, and people are now experiencing depression. So
I have no doubt. I mean, I went no caffeine. I smoked when I was severely depressed, like a social smoker at nightclubs. But I'm off alcohol and caffeine for 12 months, actually 13 months now, because I didn't resume it. I said 12 months is my route, and I have no interest to go back to. But I was literally like a bottle of wine every night just to myself, because I couldn't stand my job. So I get it, why people have a hard time with caffeine and alcohol, but now being on the other side of it, I can attest it's possible, and it's so much better. Oh my God, like I have so much energy and so much joy, and I mean, you see the energy, no caffeine. I don't drink caffeine for 13 months. And no alcohol.
You can hardly tell. All right, so we're right up on time. We appreciate everybody being here today. Oksana, I appreciate your time and sharing wisdom and your thought process around this very important issue of mental health and how to keep people healthy through all this, not just physically, but mentally as well. So I appreciate you spending the time. We have recorded this. We will have it posted with a blog on the website, petracoach.com, by the end of the day. So just go on there and share it, put it on social media. Let the world know what's going to happen and what you can do about it. So thanks for being here. Good to see you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And watch out for those resources. So we'll stay tuned. Bye.
Bye-bye.